Thank you guys so much for joining us. We are talking about pre-spawn fishing from a kayak with Jason Lack and Rob Brown today. I am Jessica Grimm. It says Anderson on here because that's my maiden name. I am I'm a marine specialist, specifically usually the sailing specialist with Navionics. But I'd like to thank you for joining us today and for Navionics for sponsoring the webinar. We have quite a few other sponsors and we will go through them tonight. All of our sponsors are donating prizes. So hang on tonight during the webinar because there are prizes spread throughout the webinar and they will only be given out to the people that are in the webinar at that time. So they'll all be given away in different ways. So there are definitely a lot of cool stuff to be given away tonight. As I was saying, I'm the Navionics specialist. I've been with Navionics for over 3 years. I'm a fisherman, diving, spearfishing, sailing, all kinds of water stuff, skiing. And we have a new addition to our little Navionics team, which I was hoping he'd still be out there, but he's already gone out on a boat ride. I have a 5-month-old, so he's the newest addition to our team. Jason is a field staff with Navionics and Tungsten pro staff member and a member of the North Alabama Kayak Anglers 2017 Angler of the Year. And he's been bass fishing for over 30 years, which impressive.
Well, when you're old, it actually doesn't seem that bad.
Well, yeah, easy there on the old now. I've been fishing for over 30 years too.
Yeah, you're much younger than I am.
And Rob is owner of Osprey Rods. Osprey is one of our co-sponsors tonight, and they will Rob is going to have a little story about Osprey Rods. He's Jackson Kayak regional fishing team member. He's a kayak ambassadors for Leaf in Creek Outfitters and Skull Gear pro staff, as well as Saber Outdoors pro staff. He has quite the rundown there. So, Rob, do you want to take over with that?
Well, I've just been living up here in North Alabama. Got into kayak fishing about 5 years ago, I guess. Grew up in Florida, bass fishing, and just fishing around Lake Kissimmee and stuff with my family. So, but once I got into kayak fishing, I pretty much got rid of everything else, and I'm all in on the kayaks now. So
that's great. Jason, did you want to say anything about your intro?
Actually, what I want to say is thank you, Jessica, for working so hard to put all this together for us. I know that Rob and I have been a great disappointment to you in our inefficiencies and inabilities while you've been busting your tail to try and put all of this stuff together. So thank you. But as far as me, no, I'm just I just like to fish. I've been kayak fishing for probably 3 years now. Last year was my first full year of fishing with North Alabama Kayak Anglers on the trail, and was very fortunate, very blessed. Had a great season. Hopefully I'll have as good of a season or better, but some of these guys, when you have a title, if you will, you have a target painted on your back, and Robert has already got the knife out and has been chasing me around with it and trying to, yeah. So I've had people threaten to drill holes in my boat already. So,
oh dear.
You might read a story on the news about a sunken kayak and a fat man floating around lost. That would be me.
As long as you're not shooting a hole in the bottom of your own boat, you're good.
Yeah, well, that might happen too.
So tonight we're going to talk about kayak fishing challenges and advantages, some of the homework you need to be doing for largemouth with Navionics Boating App and on the water, and the same for smallmouth. For those of you joining us through Zoom, you can submit a question. All the attendees are muted because there is a lot of background noise if we don't mute everyone, but you can use the Q&A section in your control panel to send us a question. So if you send us a question, we're happy to answer it in the webinar. And then if we don't get to questions at the end, if we don't get to your question, we will answer it via email afterward. And you're always welcome to respond to any emails that you receive following the webinar, and I will, either I or Jason or Rob will answer the questions. This is being recorded, so you'll have a recording of this on YouTube, on the Navionics YouTube channel, so you'll be able to access this later as well. However, only the people that are actually attending the webinar will have access to winning the prizes that we are giving away in the webinar.
You already are, though.
So Coastal Angler is sponsoring a giveaway, and Coastal Angler magazine and its freshwater interior component, the Angler magazine, are part of a national franchise publishing model that produces 35 localized editions of the magazine each month. They've been offering franchise opportunities since 2008, so almost 10 years. If someone you know would like more information on opening some of these magazines in your area, you can email them at the email address that's on the screen, and they'd be happy to send you information about the franchise opportunities. So to help kick things off with a big bang, Coastal Angler would like to host a quick contest for a free Coastal Angler Camo 12-pack deluxe canvas cooler by AO Coolers. It's valued at almost $60, 5 cents shy of $60. They will ship this complimentary to your home. So to enter this contest, you just go to the website that's listed on the screen, thecoastalanglermag.com/podcast, and they can see what time you entered this contest. So unfortunately, it's only for the people that have attended. So make sure that you go and do that tonight and tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The Coastal Angler magazine is going to announce on Facebook the winner of this contest. So you can sign up there at coastalanglermag.com/podcast. And again, if you're interested in any information on the franchise, just email info@coastalanglermagazine.com. And it looks like we already have a question. So Charles asked, do you spend more time in an area with a kayak as opposed to when you use a bass boat? And how do you balance covering water with a lack of kayak speed? So I'm going to let you guys answer that as you're talking in the webinar, since we haven't really gotten into the kayak information yet. And Charles, if they don't answer your question to your satisfaction, if you have any more questions after they've talked about it, definitely send us another question through the Q&A. So turning it over to Rob and Jason.
All right. We want to address some of the challenges and some of the advantages of fishing out of a kayak. Charles asked a question about a bass boat and, the covering water. I've had a bass boat. I don't have one at present, but I've had a bass boat, and I spent a lot more time, a lot more gas zooming around looking for fish. When I found that in a kayak, I can actually stay in an area, concentrate on an area. And that's where the Navionics app will come into play for you, Charles. If you study the Navionics app, you'll be able to find and pinpoint areas a lot faster and go to those areas and really go through them thoroughly. And that was one of the biggest advantages for me in a kayak. But you run into a lot of problems in a kayak with, you have a limited range. Being a fat guy and not lazy, but, pushing around 260, 270 pounds in a 75-pound piece of plastic, you don't want to paddle too far, so your range is a little bit limited. Some of the guys with the pedal boats, the Hobies, the Jacksons, things like that, they're able to go a little farther. I tend to stay within about a 1.5 to 2 mile radius of where I launch. But you're limited, your range can be limited, and the weather factor. If you get out too far, this has happened to me and a friend of mine, Sean Shelton. We were pre-fishing the NACA Classic last year on Pickwick, and we weren't half a mile, 3/4 of a mile from where we put in at, and a storm blew up on us quick. We got our boats out of the water just as it was blowing up, and it was nautical to say the least out there. But one of the biggest advantages that I found in fishing from a kayak is the ability to fish those unreachable spots. I've gone out in big boats, and you start kicking up mud in about 1.5 feet of water, 2 foot of water, raising the motor. You got the trolling motor, kicking up mud and everything else. But with a kayak, I can get back into that really skinny water. I can drag over the beaver dams. I can get into some spots where a bass has not seen a lure probably ever. I mean, would you agree with that, Rob?
Oh yeah, definitely. The kayaks just give you the ability to, like I said, to get those backwater areas that they don't get the pressure that the main body of the water does. We live close to Lake Guntersville, and Guntersville gets hammered every weekend, year round. But the ability of the kayaks to get back in some of those sloughs and some of those shallow water areas, we catch really good fish. And the limited range, it really depends. Sometimes I'll cover 10 miles.
Yeah, but you're not fat like me.
Get there. Sometimes I cover 10 miles. Most of the time, I'm not covering that much distance. Mainly that's inshore fishing, or, if I'm just running around in a cove or something. But, you have to, it's almost like if you play golf, if you ride in a golf cart, you play a lot faster. And if you walk, you tend to see things a little bit different. And that's how it is in a kayak. Like Jason was saying, in a bass boat, you get in, you cast a couple of times. If you don't catch any fish, you fire up and you zoom to the next spot. Well, in a kayak, you kind of have to start working and, okay, well, this didn't work, so let me try this. Or, I need to change up my presentation. So you have to pay a little bit more attention to what's going on around you. So, and while we're out fishing on the lake, we'll sit there and we'll fish, and boats will come, stop, cast, crank, and leave, and we'll just sit there and keep catching fish, So it has its advantages and disadvantages, but, to me, the advantages far outweigh, having a big boat.
A prime example of what Robert was talking about there. I was fishing the Guntersville Open last year, and I had bass boats coming on top of me, fishing all around me. They actually cut me off a few times from where I was casting to, and I didn't leave an area 100 yards wide. I stayed in this one area, and I caught some nice fish that day, and I ended up winning that tournament. But I worked that area thoroughly. You didn't fish it. Still. But I ended up.
He won. He gets the right to brag a little bit.
No, I try not to do that. But I stayed in that area, and I worked that area over thoroughly, and I caught some really nice fish that day. And I had several bass boats come in on top of me, cut me off, and almost you would think to mess up your fishing, but I stayed with it, and it paid off for me. All right, Jess, let's move on to the next slide. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about where to launch. The Navionics app, the web app, I studied this thing religiously when it comes to trying to find a place to launch, and it's really good about having places that's marked for you as far as your boat ramps, different landmarks and things of that nature. But when you're pre-spawn fishing, or just like any other time, when I'm pre-spawn fishing, I try to find those areas that I can launch from that'll be close to a spawning ground or where they're funneling into. And the slide shows a pretty good example of that. I would tell you where this is, but then I'd have to kill all of you. I don't know any of you, so we'll hold off on that. But actually, no, I will tell you. This is Spring Creek on Wheeler Lake. And one of the things that I like about fishing this area is there's a launch close to where I want to fish. And I can work areas where they funnel in and back around into the spawning flats. So I suggest to try and find a place, make sure it's a public place or that you can launch, that anyone can launch from it. You don't want to get shot by coming up on somebody's private land, but where to launch can be key because you spend more time fishing and not paddling. So try and find a place that's close. All right. The one great thing about the boating app is you can sit on your couch and you can look over the boating app or the web app and find these places to fish. So it's important to pick the spot. Where you should look and what you're looking for are typically spawning flats. And a spawning flat, for me, is anything that's out of a cold north wind, anything that catches most of that sun is going to warm up faster. And typically, upper lake and mid lake warm up faster than the lower end of the lake. So I look for those spawning flats that have pretty decent clear water, and the water level is going to be consistent and it's fairly shallow. That way it can get the proper sun penetration to warm up. And also the bottom composition is important as well. Rocks, hard bottom, sand, those tend to warm up faster than what silt will. And, you get wave action in there, silt just tends to muddy things up. I like to look for bridges. Bridges are great funnels, and they hold bait, and you will find that bass will congregate there during pre-spawn. The edge of structure and cover, one of the things I love to do in Guntersville is fish the edges of grass. You find those edges of grass and into those drop off into the deeper water. I love fishing those. And you want to find that shallow related to deep water. They're moving up into these flats and they're feeding, and then they're moving back down where they feel a little bit safer until they get ready to come up and spawn. Like I said, looking for the funnels into the spawning area, those creek channels where they have those well-defined edges, those are great areas to look. And you can find a lot of this stuff just by studying your maps and looking for those things. This is a shot from Kentucky Lake that I pulled, and you can see there's a roadbed coming in. See where Second Class Landing is? You see that there's a creek channel coming in. There's old roadbeds in there, but you'll see that you have deep water related to shallow water in this area. You have some good boat docks, and this is one of the things that I would concentrate on. This would be an area that I would concentrate on. How do you feel about it, Rob?
Yeah, I agree. I like to fish during the spawn. I actually go a little bit different route. I like to fish Lake Wheeler and get into the backwater sloughs. I look for sloughs that come off of a prominent creek or a river that's feeding in. And I look for kind of shallow, muddier water with a lot of, we call it buckbrush. I don't know if that's the real name of it.
Yeah, buckbrush.
But the bass and Wheeler will get up and they'll spawn around the buckbrush. So I like flipping and pitching. So I'll find the shallow, muddy water sloughs off the creeks and slide back in there with my kayak and actually flip and pitch around the buckbrush looking for the bass that are spawning in there. And like Jason said, use the app. Kind of you find the deep channels and look for the little offshoots that go off, and that's what I like to fish when it comes to the spawn, because I like flipping and pitching. And then once they move out post spawn, then I kind of leave the buckbrush alone for a while.
Guys, we do have a question here from Chris. He wants to know, does the temperature play a role in deciding where you fish?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. But the biggest thing about the temperature is also which lake you're on. And I'll give you a good example, Guntersville. A lot of people don't start looking for spawning fish until it gets into the 70s. And on Guntersville, I will actually start looking for bedding fish when it gets to the mid-60s. Depending on the lake that you're on, that is going to play the biggest role. But yes, for pre-spawn fish, I will start fishing pre-spawn from 51, 52 degrees up into 63 degrees, and 63 to 68, I will start looking for bedding fish. And if I'm not finding those bedding fish, or if I do find a few, I'll actually pull off of those just a little bit and look for those pre-spawn fish that are getting staging and moving up in there. But water temperature plays a huge factor into the spawn. Yes, absolutely.
And this is why you spearfish, because you can spearfish in like 85-degree water.
I don't take a bath in water that hot.
Yeah, it's so nice. This is, definitely don't want to be spearfishing in 60-something degree water.
Well, don't you wear like a dry suit or wetsuit or something like that?
Yeah, still wear a shorty wetsuit in 85-degree water. But yeah, if it goes below 80, I just don't get in.
Well, you don't have enough insulation.
Great compliment. Jason Albright wants to know main lake temperatures versus the flats temperature.
For pre-spawn fish, the main lake temp, yeah, I like to look for it in the 53, 54 range. And then you're going to find that the temperature up into the flats will be upwards of, I was running into it today, 59, 61 degrees. But yeah, I look for main lake temperatures being around 53 when I start pre-spawn fishing.
Don't give away all your secrets, because Jason Albright fishes against you, so don't be giving away all your secrets.
I have no secrets. I pulled all this from Robert's notes.
So we have come to the Woo Tungsten giveaway. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about Woo Tungsten before we do the giveaway? Woo
Tungsten is a awesome tungsten manufacturer. They make tungsten weights. And if you've ever fished lead versus tungsten, one of the biggest things is the compact size. An 1/8 ounce tungsten weight is much, much smaller than an 1/8 ounce lead weight. And the fact that you can feel contact a lot better, because that tungsten is going to resonate that feeling, that bottom a little bit better up your line than what that lead will. That lead will kind of absorb just a little bit of it because of its density. Woo Tungsten was very gracious to sponsor me this year. I've been using their product for a couple of years now and have fell in love with them, and I feel very privileged to be a part of their team. Go check out their website at wootungsten.com. And I believe that our attendees get a discount, don't they, Jess?
They do. So Woo Tungsten is offering a discount for attendees. So it's not listed on the slides. You actually have to be in the webinar to get it. But you just have to type in when you get to your checkout and it asks for promotion code, you just have to type in Navionics 10. So Navionics 10. In all caps.
All
Navionics
caps.
10. So, and to sign up in order to receive or to win the Woo Tungsten prize pack tonight as an attendee for the webinar, you will, we are going to, at the end, we'll use a computer program to randomly pick an attendee that was actually attending the webinar, and then we will email you, and we'll email you and tell you that you won, and then ask for your your actual address so that the prize pack can be shipped to your home.
Are you delivering it personally?
I am not. Jessica might.
I feel cheated.
It depends on where it is, and if I can take my 5-month-old with me.
All right. Moving on. Give you an idea of what to look for on the water. The boating app and your Navionics chart, they will, as long as you have the most up-to-date chart, and you can go to the Navionics website and update your chart for 1 year after purchase, they should coincide, and they will. What you're looking for when you're on the water is look for that hard bottom, the sand and that gravel. Robert likes to look for buck brushes, look for buck brush, but even around that buck brush, you're going to find a little bit of hard bottom, some sand and gravel. And look for bait fish. The fish are hungry. They're trying to feed up because they're about to go through their love-making process, if you will. And it takes a lot of energy from what I understand. I don't remember. The water temp, and addressing Jason's question, the water temp is important. Yes, absolutely. Since you're fishing against me, you want to look for 90 to 120 degree water. At least that much.
And don't forget, Jason's the same guy that caught like 62 inches in 30 minutes sitting in one spot. So don't forget that.
150 degree water, Jason. That's what you're looking for. No, water temperature is important. And where the bait and the fish are in the water column, that's going to give you an idea of where they're going to be moving into and how quickly they'll be moving in there. If you're catching fish in 15 feet of water because the bait is down there and you're fishing that deep, then, it's going to be a little while before they start moving up shallow and hitting those funnels. So pay attention to that on your graph. That's one of those key things. They're feeding up because it's that time and they're going to be fat. What I like to throw, search baits, lipless crankbaits, square bills, things like that. I have a confession on lipless crankbaits. I hate them. I absolutely hate throwing a rattle trap, but they are the best thing to throw this time of year. A little bit of a tip, and Jason, plug your ears. Look at the height of the grass. And one of the things that I found, I have a difficult time throwing a rattle trap or lipless crankbait out of a kayak. I have a hard time ripping it out of the grass because you have that resistance. I need to get Robert to build me a stiffer rod from Osprey Rods. Good shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
And a square bill. I actually like throwing a square bill around points and things like that. So that's a great bait to use for a search bait. If they're a little bit deeper, a jig, a swim bait, medium to deep diving crankbait, and shallow, soft plastics. That's my go-to. Soft plastics, swim jig. And if you're a guy named Greg Massa, he is a topwater expert. So anytime that they're biting topwater, you can just go ahead and go into the house if Massa's on the water. But the biggest thing is just whatever you have confidence in, whatever you think you can catch fish on, whatever you feel confident in catching fish on this time of year, throw it. It's not going to hurt. Just stay with it.
So I had a couple of things. I just wanted to mention that Mario said, so I was talking about not getting in the water if it was less than 80 degrees. And even if it was 85, I still wear a shorty. So Mario actually spearfishes in 40 degree water. And I told him that he has a lot more balls than me.
The question to Mario is, are the sharks slower in 40 degree water? I don't know.
Yeah, right? I'm very familiar with the sharks in the Bahamas, and let me tell you, they are not slow, and they are very aggressive. And Mario says, no, they're not.
Mario says, nope.
That's literally what he said, nope. And Silas was asking, on Lakes Pickwick and Guntersville, will bass still move to secluded sloughs over the flats in the main river around islands and other barriers from the wind or cooler water?
Robert, I'll let you have that one.
Yeah, the fish will transition, I think, up into the sloughs to get out of the wind. I find if you get in those backward sloughs when it's kind of cool, fish around structure, if you find blowdowns and stuff, because that wood's going to heat up. And it's going to hold heat a little bit more than just open water. And like I said, get out of the wind. And, because if you're in a kayak, the fish are kind of like you. You don't want to be out there in the wind. You want to kind of find some quiet water. A lot of times the fish are going to relate to that quiet water as well. Like I said, I stay off the main lake, so I fish a lot of the backwaters. And, it tends to be in those little calm pockets is where you'll find you can find some pretty good fish. So, yeah. That's what I find, but fish are very particular.
And I'm kind of, and Robert brings up a great point. And one of the things that I love is the different perspective. Kind of the opposite. I'll actually hang out in the mouth of a big slough like that and really work that area over and out from it before I start moving into it. And I tend to catch some decent pre-spawn fish in those areas, in those staging areas. So, Silas, I'll tell you, it's try and work the area over thoroughly and then just start moving your way in. Robert is absolutely right about wood warming up faster, rocks warm up faster. And you'll even find that some of the places like Gunnersville and Pickwick that has milfoil and hydrilla, that decaying grass actually warms the water up a little bit from the bottom, believe it or not.
And now we have a comment or question, I'm not really sure, from Chris, who says, what about one-legged lunker hunt frogs in pre-spawn? Do they work?
The one-legged lunker hunter frog.
All I can tell you about that, is it McNeil or Marks? It doesn't matter. McNeil or Marks. The one thing about the one-legged lunker hunter frog is you can buy them all day long at Mayfield Kayak Sales and Lunker Frog Emporium. Just if you will get on the nacatrail.com, you'll find a sticker on there, and you can buy one of those as well. But Mayfield Kayak Sales and Lunker Frog Emporium will have them on clearance with a bottle or a tube of crazy glue.
Speaking of crazy, Mario has now responded about the 40-degree spearfishing, and they have white sharks on the coast of Oregon where he spearfishes, and I promptly told him he was crazy.
Mario, we do not have white sharks in the Tennessee River. Thankfully.
Yes.
Now the biggest thing, put your pattern together. Mark the spots where you catch fish. Hit that waypoint button on your graph, mark those spots, and pay attention to the depth, the water temperature, the bottom composition, and what kind of cover you caught it on. And even pay attention to the weather. Pay attention to what the weather conditions are, and you'll be able to put that pattern together from there. And even then, at that point, that pattern will probably hold true in that area of the lake for days to come and even years to come. The fish that's in that picture right there, I actually caught that fish in 8-foot water fishing the edge of milfoil on an Alabama rig. And that fish is a little over 8 pounds. And I believe the water temp was, like I said, about 49 degrees or so, 46 to 49 degrees thereabouts. And that thing hit like a hammer. And you can tell by the coloration that it's been a shallow water fish. So you will find these type of fish hanging on the edges of this cover. But mark that spot and stay with it and start looking for these other spots. Using the Navionics app, you will find that same type of bottom composition. Just look for that stuff.
So kind of along those same lines, Philip has a question. If you spook spawning fish in the shallow water, what should you do to still catch them?
Back off. Back off from them for about 30 minutes or so. And figure out what you did to spook it out first. But back out of that area, wait about 30 minutes, 45 minutes. I've even waited as long as an hour before I'll throw it back up on the bed. Just mark it on your depth finder, mark it as a waypoint, and pull out and fish somewhere else, and then come back to it. Because that fish, if it's on bed, it will stay there, and it'll bite eventually.
Awesome. And William, I'm sorry to let you know that you might not have white sharks, but William does point out that you have cottonmouth snakes.
Yeah.
Okay, let me tell you. We had 4 cottonmouths on our dock, like right there in our backyard in the last 2 months. And we killed the last one this morning in February.
Yeah, but it's like 90 degrees where you are.
Exactly. It had to be at least 110 today.
Are you serious?
It was in the 80s, but it felt like 110. It's February. It's all relative.
Global warming.
Exactly.
Let's see. Homework for smallmouth. Robert's more of a smallmouth guy than I am. The homework for smallmouth is a little bit different, but the same. Okay, you're looking for different structure than largemouth. And I apologize, guys. I thought I had inserted a photo, but Robert pointed out to me that I suck. And Jessica probably will never work with me again on something like this, and I wouldn't blame her. But
you guys are so much fun. Definitely worth the missing photo.
Okay, so different structure from largemouth. You're looking more from, and this is from my experience, guys, so please take it for what it's worth. I look for steep bluffs, main lake points, rock piles, things like that close to spawning grounds. And I look for spots out of the cold prevailing winds. North side usually warms up first. North side of a lake, the upper end typically warms up first. And you just kind of want to narrow down where you want to fish. Once again, using the Navionics app, you can find a lot of these things. Google Earth is also really handy when it comes to that. I use both of them. And when I see something on the Navionics app, I'll pull it up on Google Earth and kind of get a bearing on it and see what the shore looks like if I can get a good picture of it. On the water, ma'am?
Yep, perhaps I might be using the wrong version of the presentation since we have 2 missing photos.
Maybe. I bet the rest of them are missing too then. That's okay.
I hope not.
I'm not worried about it. Same principles on the water, same principles as largemouth when it comes right down to it. But I look for cuts in the banks and out of the current. These fish will tend to get up in these eddies and really hammer bait as it's swimming by. Small gravel and sand transitions from big rock, hard bottom, smooth bottom kind of thing. I like fishing that kind of thing. Robert probably has a different experience when it comes to the creek fishing, and if it's all right, I'm going to let Robert talk about the creek fishing aspect of it. What I'm talking about is more of highland reservoirs and the Tennessee River chain when it comes to what's on the slide. But I'll let Robert talk a little bit about creek fishing and what he sees.
Yeah, for the smallmouth, if I'm chasing smallmouth, I'm going to hit a creek, some small moving water somewhere here, North Alabama, Southern Tennessee. We have some really good smallmouth waters. So when I'm looking for smallmouth, even when it's getting time for them to spawn, it's kind of the same principle for the smallmouth and the largemouth as it is in the lake. Just floating down the river, I'm looking for where a creek's coming in, or where maybe there's a backwater, a deeper creek that shoots off the river. There are blowdowns and stuff like that. Those fish will get up in there. So it's just, just like you're really on the main lake. But the rivers up here, for the most part, have a limestone, gravel, kind of hard bottoms. So, look for those eddy breaks, the water leading into a rapid or the water on the backside of a shoal is really good to find smallmouth hanging around in those, the riffles and stuff like that. I've caught smallmouth in 6 inches of water and had them just nail swim baits, as I'm just basically trying to get them across the rock so I don't get hung up. It's kind of it's surprising how shallow of water you can actually find these fish sometimes. And like Jason said, as the water is warming up, look for those things that'll hold the heat, that'll warm up faster, like the rock bars, riprap, things like that. It's gonna heat up the water. It's gonna draw in the bait, the little microorganisms, and the shad's gonna come in and feed on them. And then of course the bass and stuff are gonna follow up onto that structure as well.
Mario, to answer your question as far as the water temp goes for smallmouth, different areas, different ideas and perspectives on that. I typically start looking for pre-spawn smallmouth in 45-degree water. 45 to 49 degrees. 49 is really about it. That's when I really start keying in on them hard. Once the water temp gets up to 51, 52 degrees, that's when things really start getting good, especially in Highland reservoirs in Tennessee and those areas. One of my favorite places to fish is Dale Hollow in Tennessee. And this has been years ago since I've been. And I've not done it out of a kayak, but that is on my that's on my list. I love fishing a float and fly on that lake during December, January timeframe. And man, you want to talk about some huge smallmouth. That lake is full of 3 and 4 pound smallmouth. And catch them in 40 feet of water under a cork, with 10 foot of line underneath it and a 16-ounce jig, or bear jig or something like that.
And we have a couple more questions coming in. Philip wants to know, is there any difference between lake and river spawning points?
Not really. I mean, you're still looking kind of for, the shallower areas. Like I said, I find them on the river that I fish mostly up here, the little backwater sloughs where they're more or less like where creeks run off, when we have a lot of rain and they make those little backwater sloughs. Usually a lot of times I can sneak up in there in a kayak and you can find them on bed in there, or you find them on a transition where it's, where there's an outer bank that's been washed out. If there's a rock bar or something where it falls off, you'll find them along that area. Like Jason said, kind of the shallow area, shallow water where they can spawn or whatever, but it has the deep water next to it to where, if something happens, they get spooked, they can take cover, and kind of get to that deeper water where they feel safer. So it's kind of the same. You just have to worry. Well, not worry, but you just have the current playing into it now to where, the current breaks and things like that.
The one thing that I've found about smallmouth as opposed to largemouth, obviously smallmouth are going to spawn in deeper water when it comes to lakes, and they're going to hang out on those deeper main lake points and move up onto those points before they start heading back into their spawning coves. As far as rivers go, technically, I guess, the Tennessee River chain of lakes, it is current. There is current there from generation and flood control and things like that, but not all the time, not like you're flowing smaller bodies of water. So it's really going to depend on how big of a river you're talking about or how big of a lake you're talking about. Yeah. But I tend to hang more on those main points, main lake points, and then work my way back in for spawning smallmouth.
And typically the rivers I fish are probably waist deep, I fish what they call skinny water a lot. So moving water waist deep, you have some deep holes, but I like more of the backwater moving waters than the main lakes. You're deep. You're a hole.
We have another question from Chris. Is line important, mono, fluoro, or braid?
That depends on who you are.
Yes, and yes.
It depends on, for me, I throw crankbaits on mono, but everything else I use copoly and braid. And the only time I use braid is on moving baits, frogs, things like that. But I know a lot of these guys like to use fluoro leaders. I use a fluoro leader on braid. But I typically throw copolymer. Robert may be different. I'm sure he is.
Yeah,
he's different. He's different.
I use a monofilament for top water, but usually most all my reels are spooled with braid, and then I just use different leaders. Like if I'm fishing top water, then I'll put a monofilament leader on there for that shock absorption. The mono will float a little bit better, so you get a bit better action with the lure. Usually because fishing out of a kayak, I want to be able to kind of transition back and forth pretty quick. So for my frog rod, if I wanted, I can put a leader on it and then I can use it for something else, if I'm doing a big swim bait or something. So then if I want to go back to a frog, I can just cut it off and tie back to the 65-pound braid. And then for my more finesse, my shaky heads and stuff, I use the high vis braid just because I can't see really good. So the bright yellow braid, I can really And a lot of times, the fish may not, you don't get that thump. It's just, sometimes you just see the braid, you just see the line just kind of start going upstream, or it does something that it's not supposed to do. That's the only indication that you have a fish on. So I use the high vis braid for that.
In Robert's advanced age,
yes.
he may go that direction. Like I said, I'm completely different. One thing that I found about using mono for me, even on top water or anything like that, I cannot get the hook set that I need. Unless I'm anchored out, I used to throw mono religiously. I can't get the hook sets that I need. That's why I went to a co-poly and braid with floral leader.
Okay, great. We don't have any more questions coming in right now. Did you guys want to wrap up the smallmouth?
Yeah. If you are fishing against me in a NACA tournament, I suggest that you go in the middle of the channel and drop a one-legged lunker frog drop shot or something like that. No, I'm kidding. Smallmouth wise, a couple of the baits that I really like to use whenever I'm smallmouth fishing, search bait wise, anything like that. I don't throw a lot of lipless crankbait, but you can catch smallmouth on lipless crankbaits. I like a hair jig and a short arm spinnerbait whenever I am fishing pre-spawn smallmouth, and I tend to throw a 200 or 300 series bandit, brown crawfish, red crawfish color, paralleling the bank in about 15 to 20 feet of water in those transition areas where they're funneling back into those coves. I will work the point and then I will work my way back in. I have caught some nice smallmouth, and I've got spanked in some tournaments by some guys doing the exact same thing. So a lot of it is knowing where the bait is, following the bait in, you'll find the smallmouth, and working those areas thoroughly. The great thing about fishing out of a kayak is you're able to stay in those areas and stealthy, and it forces you really to stay in an area. Use the Navionics app. It's there. The web app is free. Get on the website, open it up, do your homework, find these areas, and get out there and just fish. That's the only way you're really gonna find them, is just get out there.
Yeah. So we have one question from Whaler Carrier, who says, "Could you talk about boat positioning
in relation to as far as how I position?"
That came in a few minutes ago, so probably
okay.
the backwater.
Okay. You may be talking about moving water. I'm not sure. If you get an opportunity, Willard, if you don't mind, clarify that. I'll let Robert talk a little bit about his boat positioning and moving water, and then I will work on the main lake stuff.
Usually, if I'm fishing moving water, I like to keep my boat oriented just downstream as I'm going, and then if I see something that I want to fish, then I can turn the boat, point the nose of it upriver, and kind of paddle to keep myself, steady. Or if I see an eddy line or something that I want to fish, if I'm going downriver, I can turn and get into the eddy water. Use of drag chain. I have a power pole micro, so that helps a lot, because if you see something, some area you want to hit, you can drop the power pole down, and it's going to hold you. I've used my power pole to hold me at the mouth of some class 3 rapids down on the Coosa River. So it's a little bit different in the moving water, like I said, because things are coming at you that you see something, you have to fish far ahead of you. You have to plan, okay, where there's a blowdown, I want to fish it, so I got to position my boat and learn to cast with both hands. Cast right or left handed, because that comes in handy, because sometimes you're casting, you'll have to flip behind you, sometimes you're flipping in front of you, so you just have to be very versatile.
So Walter just specified that he's asking about spawning coves.
Okay.
Okay, spawning coves. If you're side fishing, stay as far back as you can, make a long cast. I tend to stay closer to the shaded, I'm going to position my boat more in a spawning cove to the shaded side, because I know that those fish that I'm targeting are going to be more on the side where the sun is hitting, because the rocks are warmer and the water's just a little bit warmer, and you have the shadows behind you. In a kayak, that's what I tend to do.
Great. We have, so William is noting that he says he's 73 and he bought a kayak in 2009. At the end of the day, he paddles as fast as he possibly can. So it's great for cardio. So he's killing two birds with one stone. He also owns an outboard jet drive for shallow water rivers.
That's awesome.
So I think this is a great point, that this is like, I mean, when we go out fishing, we don't get any exercise. So that's definitely something you guys have over everybody else. Kayakers get a ton of exercise.
We tend to, depending on who you're fishing with. If you're fishing with someone like Nate Mayfield, you'll have a lot of exercise, flipping your boat over and catching your stuff out of the water. Or if you're fishing with a guy like Robert Brown, you're going to be dragging over beaver dams and things like that and fighting off cottonmouths, because he really gets back off into those shady areas. For me, I just fight the wind. So, yeah.
So Kevin is also wondering about how many rods you have with you and what setup is a must for you during the pre-spawn.
I actually, as far as my rod setup goes, I fish 15-pound co-poly and medium heavy fast. And I also really love, and this is probably one of the best all-around rods that I've got. I have a 7-foot Osprey heavy fast. That rod is probably the best all-around rod that I have, especially for me. I can fish a jig with it. It will cast a weightless Cinco with ease. So any one of those two, those are my two go-to setups when I'm fishing pre-spawn and spawn.
Great.
I use, well, if we're fishing a tournament, or if I have my Jackson big rig, I can carry probably up to 8 or 9 rods stored down in the boat.
I carry 4.
It's a dirty little secret, but yes. If I'm in my big rig, chances are there's probably 8, 9, maybe 10 rods in the hole, just because I'm too lazy to tie and retie and stuff. So, but I use a 7-foot, either a 6'10" or a 7-foot medium extra fast rod for the spawn, because a lot of times I'm flipping a small, like a D-bomb or even a baby D-bomb sometimes. So the medium extra fast has a lot of tip. So in the kayak, I don't really have to get a lot of arm movement. I can just take and use that tip just to kind of shoot, almost like shooting docks, but just get the jig or the D-bomb out there. And the 6'10" I use a lot with the weightless, like the Zoom Super Flukes, because if I find a fish on bed or whatever, and if I can't entice them with the D-bomb or whatever, then I'll take that Super Fluke and I'll skip it, and I'll just keep basically bug them until they strike it to try to get it away from them or whatever. Like Jason said, if I spook them off the bed, I'll leave. I'll fish around and come back. But that medium extra fast is, and year before, I didn't fish many tournaments last year. But
you didn't fish any tournaments last year.
Fished 2. The year before last, I fished freshwater and saltwater, and every tournament fish I caught, with the exception of one, I caught on that medium extra fast. So
we only have a couple minutes left, but I do have some rather provocative comments. Silas says, Rob had a lot of exercise at the SK Pickwick tournament last March.
Oh. Okay, the Pickwick tournament was bad. I'll say that.
Robert has never caught a chain pickerel, and that's what he was.
Yeah, I figured that's what Silas was about to bring up.
Yeah, because there's so many chain pickerels on Pickwick. I mean, I caught one out there, and I wasn't even trying.
No, that tournament, Silas had us out there in hurricane force winds, and they were pushing like 80,000 cubic feet through.
Oh my
We
gosh.
should have not been on the river. And Silas was like, "Follow me. I'll show you where the fish are." And so he was nice enough to put me on the biggest school of white bass I think I've ever seen.
And then we have a question from Philip who says, "What's your go-to lure?"
For pre-spawn, my go-to lure is chartreuse dynamite, and
With a quick fuse,
and covered in gasoline. I'm not going to tell you that. No, I'm kidding. I really tend to fish a lot of missile baits, peg Texas rig with a Tungsten 1/8 ounce, or if I'm flipping heavy cover, I will go with the new punch weight that Tungsten has out now, and really flip grass mats and around that heavier stuff with a D-bomb or a destroyer and the 48.
Yeah, I use the missile baits, the D-bomb. If the fish are looking for a little bit more action, then I'll switch over to a destroyer. Really, that's in a Zoom Super Fluke. If they're really aggressive, then I'll throw even a whopper plopper. If they're really super aggressive, they're being very territorial, I'll throw a whopper plopper or a top toad.
One leg lunker frog.
No, they swim in circles. They're not worth it.
Well, so that's awesome. Awesome answers. So we are out of time, but I wanted to say thank you for joining the webinar. And if you have any questions, email Grimm, JGRIMM at Navionics.com, or you can just respond to one of the emails that comes from Zoom automatically after the webinar. We will also be giving away a Navionics web app and or mobile app. So that will be chosen from the people that attended the webinar. So we will be emailing you if you won the app. So there are a couple of people, lucky winners, that will be getting emails if you are a winner. So thank you so much to Jason and Rob both for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks, Jessica.
It was very entertaining. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, and if anyone has any questions, any remaining questions, definitely respond back to us, and we will answer your questions via email. Thanks, everyone, for joining.